It was a cold and rainy evening in the heart of the city. The streets were wet, and water flowed into the drains as people hurried to get home. Shops were closing, traffic lights flickered on, and horns echoed through the narrow roads. Some people ran, holding umbrellas, while others stood under shops to stay dry. Jamil Thompson, a 27-year-old black man, walked quietly down a lonely side street. He wore a black hoodie and carried a small backpack. His face looked tired, and his eyes showed pain. He didn't walk fast or slow, just steady. He wasn't in a rush. His mind was full of thoughts and his heart was heavy. That street was not part of his usual route, but today wasn't a usual day. As he passed by a bakery, he looked inside and saw a mother holding her child. She was feeding the boy a piece of warm bread. Jamil smiled for a second, remembering something from his past, but the smile faded quickly. Then everything changed in a blink. A loud siren broke the silence. 2 police cars came speeding into the street. Tires screeched, doors flew open, and 4 officers jumped out. The red and blue lights reflected off the wet road and shined on Jamil's hoodie. "Put your hands up," one officer shouted, pointing his gun. Jamil stopped. He didn't run, he raised his hands slowly, confused. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice soft and shaking. The officers didn't answer him directly. One officer whispered to another, "That's him. He matches the description from the call. Black male, black hoodie, medium build, late 20s. The other officer nodded. "Looks like the guy from the store robbery. Let's take him." Jamil's eyes widened. "Robbery?" he said, almost to himself. "I didn't do anything, but they didn't listen." In a moment, they pushed him against the cold brick wall. One officer roughly grabbed his arms and put handcuffs on him. "Why are you arresting me?" Jamil asked again. His voice was still calm, but fear was growing in his eyes. "Just be quiet," an officer snapped. "You'll talk at the station." A small crowd began to gather across the street. Some people pulled out their phones and started recording. Others just watched in silence. One old man shook his head and whispered, "This city never learns." Jamil looked at the people watching. Him. His eyes pleaded for someone to believe him, but no one moved. No one spoke. "Please," he said again. "I'm not who you think I am. I just came from the hospital." But the officers were focused on their own plan. One officer took his bag and opened it. Inside were hospital papers, a water bottle, and a small gift box. He didn't bother reading the papers. He just closed the bag and said, "We'll check this later." Another officer looked him up and down. "You look nervous. That means you're hiding something." Jamil didn't reply. What could he say? He had done nothing wrong, but to them he already looked guilty. They put him in the back of the police car. The seat was cold. The cuffs hurt his wrists. He looked out the window as the car pulled away. The street, the bakery, the people, they all disappeared behind him. Rain tapped against the glass like tiny fingers. He thought about what had just happened, how quickly things had turned. Just 20 minutes ago, he had been in a hospital room, holding someone's hand. Now he was in a police car, arrested for something he didn't even know about. As the car drove toward the station, one officer looked at Jamil in the rearview mirror. "You should have picked a better outfit, man," he said. "Black hoodie? In this neighborhood? That's just asking for trouble." Jamil didn't answer. He just looked down at his hands, hands that had helped someone, hands that had given life, but no one cared about that now. In the front seat, the officers talked about the robbery. They said the guy took money and ran through this area, had a knife too. "Yep," the other replied. "This one fits everything. We'll check the footage, but I'm sure it's him." The rain grew heavier as they arrived at the station. Jamil stepped out quietly, the cuffs still on. He didn't resist. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. But in his eyes there was a storm of pain, confusion, and silence. The police station was cold and quiet, with white lights that made everything feel even more serious. Jamil sat alone in a small room with gray walls, a steel table, and one empty chair across from him. His hands were still cuffed, and his hoodie was damp from the rain. He looked around the room. There were no windows, only a camera in the corner. watching him. Minutes passed, maybe more than minutes, he couldn't tell. Time felt slow in that room. Jamil kept thinking about the hospital, about why he was on that street, about the small girl he had hugged just an hour ago. Finally, the door opened. 2 officers walked in. One was older, with a strong build and a cold face. The other was younger, maybe in his early 30s, and looked unsure. The older officer, Sergeant Mason, sat across from Jamil and dropped a file on the table. "You want to tell us where you were at 5:45 p.m.? Mason asked. Jamil looked up. "I was at the hospital." Mason raised an eyebrow. "Which hospital?" "St. Mary's General." "Room 312, Jamil replied. Mason didn't believe him. He leaned back and crossed his arms. "That's funny, because at 5:47, someone matching your exact description ran out of a store on 8th Avenue with stolen money." Jamil looked confused. "I don't even know where 8th Avenue is." The younger officer, Officer Ray, opened Jamil's backpack. He took out a folder and started flipping through the papers. One of them had a hospital logo. Another had the words "organ donor" written in bold. Ray read silently, frowning, but Mason didn't stop. "Don't lie to us, Jamil." The store clerk described a black man about your age wearing a black hoodie and carrying a backpack. "You match that 100%. "I know how I look," Jamil said softly. "But I'm not a thief. I didn't rob anyone." Mason slammed his hand on the table. "Then why did you run?" "I didn't run," Jamil replied. "I was just walking. You stopped me before I could even speak." Ray looked up from the papers. "Sergeant, this paper says he was in surgery today. Donated a kidney." Mason waved his hand. "Could be fake. People fake documents all the time." Ray didn't look convinced. He asked gently, "Why were you at the hospital, Jamil?" Jamil looked at him. His eyes were calm but tired. "I gave my kidney to a little girl named Mia. She needed it for months. Her mother couldn't afford a donor. I was a match." Ray stared at him. "Are you related to her?" "No," Jamil replied. "She's not my family. I just wanted to help." Mason laughed bitterly. "You expect us to believe you gave away your organ to a stranger?" Jamil nodded slowly. "Yes." "Why?" Ray asked, genuinely curious. Jamil leaned back in the chair. "Because I was in that hospital 5 years ago, dying. Someone I never met gave me a second chance. I wanted to do the same." The room went silent. Ray looked down at the document again. There was a doctor's signature, a date. The operation had happened earlier that morning. Mason rubbed his forehead. "Still doesn't prove you didn't rob that store." "I don't even have any money," Jamil said. "Check my pockets, check my bag, there's nothing." Ray did. All he found were hospital forms, a pack of tissues, a charger, and a small pink gift box. "What's this?" he asked. Jamil smiled a little. "A bracelet. Mia gave it to me before I left." Ray opened the box and saw a handmade bracelet with the words "Thank you, hero" written in colorful beads. For a moment, Ray didn't speak. Mason looked uncomfortable now. "Still, we have to follow procedure," he muttered. "Until we're sure." Ray turned to his partner. "We should call the hospital. The name matches. The papers are real. The bracelet." Mason stood up. "Call them, but don't get your hopes. People lie all the time." As the 2 officers walked out, Jamil sat alone again. He looked at the camera in the corner. "I didn't do anything wrong," he whispered. "Why is that never enough?" Outside the room, Ray picked up the phone. He dialed the hospital. A nurse answered. "Hello, this is Officer Ray from the City Police Department. We have a man here named Jamil Thompson. Can you confirm if he had surgery today?" The nurse paused, then replied, "Jamil? Oh yes, he's the donor. He just left not long ago. We've been trying to reach him. He disappeared before we could even thank him properly." Ray's eyes widened. "He donated a kidney today." "Yes," she said, "and saved a little girl's life." Ray looked back at the door. Inside, Jamil was still waiting, still silent, still wearing cuffs. But outside, things were starting to change. Officer Ray stood in the hallway, holding the phone tightly. The nurse's words echoed in his mind. He's the donor. He saved a little girl's life. He hung up slowly, then looked through the small glass window in the door to the interrogation room. Jamil sat there, still cuffed, still silent. His head was down, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. Ray walked back inside the room, holding the hospital file in his hand. Jamil didn't look up. Ray sat across from him and said softly, "The hospital confirmed everything." Still, Jamil said nothing. Ray continued, "The surgery, the donation, the little girl, Mia. You saved her today." Jamil slowly raised his eyes. They were tired but calm. "I told you the truth," he said. "I always did." Ray nodded, guilt showing on his face. Sergeant Mason stepped in behind Ray, arms crossed. "Even if the hospital confirms it," Mason said coldly, "we still have a robbery suspect that looks exactly like you." Jamil stared at him. "So what now? You need me to prove I'm not someone else?" Ray stood up. "I want to see the footage from that robbery." Mason shrugged. "Go ahead. Waste your time." Ray walked out quickly and headed to the evidence. It was dark, with shelves full of old case files and a small monitor where security camera footage could be played. He found the clip labeled, "Stowe, bright red sneakers." Ray's eyes widened. He remembered clearly Jamil had entered the station wearing old white trainers, wet from the rain. No red, no new shoes, no signs of running. Ray checked the time on the video again, 47 p.m. He pulled out Jamil's hospital file and looked at the discharge time, 5:42 p.m. There was no way Jamil could have been at the robbery scene 5 minutes later. The hospital was nearly 20 minutes away from the store. Ray rushed back to the interrogation room. "Mason!" he called out. Mason turned. "What now?" Ray dropped a photo from the video on the table. "Look at the shoes." Mason leaned in. "Red, so?" Ray pointed at Jamil's feet under the table. "White, not even close." Mason frowned. "That's not enough to clear him." Ray pulled out the discharge form, and he left the hospital at 5:42. The robbery happened at 5:47. The store is at least 20 minutes away. He couldn't be in two places at once. Mason didn't speak. His lips tightened. His eyes showed hesitation. Ray turned to Jamil. "I believe you. I really do." Jamil let out a slow breath. For the first time since his arrest, his shoulders relaxed slightly. Mason still wasn't ready to admit fault. "We'll check everything again," he said, avoiding Jamil's eyes. Ray nodded. "We should. But first we need to take off the cuffs." Mason didn't move. Ray walked over and gently unlocked them. Jamil rubbed his wrists. They were red and marked. "I didn't deserve this," he said softly. Ray lowered his head. "No, you didn't." There was a long silence. Then Jamil pulled something out of his pocket. It was the pink bracelet from Mia, the one that said, "Thank you, hero." He placed it on the table. "That little girl has been in pain for years," he said. "Today she smiled. That's all I wanted." Ray looked at the bracelet. It was small, made with plastic beads, but somehow it felt heavier than anything else in the room. "You're more than what we saw on that street," Ray said quietly. "We should have looked deeper before judging." Mason turned and walked out without saying another word. Jamil stood up, finally free. "Can I go now?" he asked. Ray nodded. "Yes, and I'm sorry for what happened." Jamil picked up the bracelet and slid it into his pocket. "Be sorry for the next person you stop for looking like someone else." Ray nodded slowly, understanding more than he ever had before. As Jamil walked out of the room, Ray watched him leave, not just as a man released, but as a man who carried both pain and strength in silence. Jamil stepped out of the police station into the cold night air. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still dark and heavy. Drops of water clung to the edge of his hoodie. He stood there for a moment, breathing deeply, as if trying to let go of the storm inside him. He had been treated like a criminal, but he wasn't one. He was a man who had given a piece of himself to save a life. Now he walked away, quietly, like nothing had happened. But in his heart, something had changed forever. Back inside the station, Officer Ray sat at his desk, staring at the screen. The robbery footage played again and again. The red shoes, the rough voice, the way the man moved. It was fast, wild, nothing like Jamil's calm walk earlier that evening. Ray opened the file again. Time of robbery, 5:47 p.m. Suspect description: black male, mid-20s, black hoodie, red sneakers, thin build, scar on right cheek. Ray paused. Scar on right cheek? He zoomed in again, and there it was, a small, thin scar under the man's eye. Jamil had no scar. Suddenly, Ray remembered something. Just a week ago, there was a petty thief named Trey Matthews who had been released. His record included store thefts, fights, and drug charges. Ray typed his name into the system. Match found: Trey was 26, thin, same height, same build, often wore hoodies. And in his latest mugshot, a scar on his right cheek. Ray's eyes lit up. He rushed to the evidence room again and pulled the case file. Inside, he found the address where Trey had last been seen, an old apartment on Jefferson Street, not far from 8th Avenue. Ray grabbed his coat and keys. He wasn't going to wait. Meanwhile, Jamil walked toward the bus stop. His legs were sore. His head throbbed, but he didn't complain. He just wanted to get back to the hospital to see Mia, to see the smile that made everything worth it. As he waited at the stop, an old woman sat beside him. She looked at his tired face and his hospital bracelet. "You okay, son?" she asked kindly. Jamil forced a small smile. "Yeah, just had a rough day." She nodded. "Sometimes, rough days show you who you really are." He looked at her, surprised by the truth in her words. Back on Jefferson Street, Ray parked quietly and walked toward the apartment. He didn't call for backup. He just wanted to talk. He knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again, harder. Then, the door opened slightly. A young man peeked out. Same build, hoodie on, and yes, red sneakers. Ray's heart jumped. "Trey Matthews," he asked. "Who's asking?" the man said, trying to close the door. Ray pushed forward. "I'm Officer Ray. I just want to ask about something that happened tonight." "I don't know anything," Trey said, trying to step back. But Ray had already noticed something: a wad of cash on the table behind Trey and a store receipt. Ray's voice got firm. "You were at 8th Avenue, weren't you?" Trey froze. And then, he ran. Ray chased him through the hallway, down the stairs, into the alley behind the building. "Stop, police!" Ray shouted. But Trey kept running, leaping over trash cans, pushing past fences, until Ray tackled him to the ground. Both of them breathed hard. Ray looked at the red shoes, the scar, and he knew. "You robbed that store," Ray said. Trey didn't answer. He didn't have to. Back at the station, Trey was booked for robbery. The cash was returned. The store clerk confirmed it was him, and Ray, he couldn't stop thinking about Jamil. How close they came to locking up the wrong man. How close they came to destroying someone innocent. He picked up his phone and dialed the hospital. "Is Jamil still there?" he asked. "Yes," the nurse said. "He just came back to see the girl." Ray drove straight there. At the hospital, he walked through the quiet halls until he found room 312. Inside, he saw Jamil sitting by a bed. A little girl lay sleeping, her tiny hand in his. Jamil looked up as Ray entered. For a second, both men said nothing. Then Ray stepped forward. "You were right," he said. "It wasn't you. We caught the real guy." Jamil didn't say anything. Ray continued, "I wanted to tell you and also thank you, not just for your patience but for what you did today." Jamil finally spoke. "I didn't want thanks. I just didn't want to be treated like I was nothing." Ray nodded, ashamed. "You're not nothing, Jamil. You're a hero." They shook hands quietly. No big words, no cameras, just truth. The next morning, sunlight peeked through the hospital windows. Birds chirped softly outside, and inside room 312, little Mia opened her eyes. Her mother gasped. "Mia, you're awake!" Jamil stood quietly in the corner, his hoodie still damp, eyes tired but full of peace. He had waited all night just to see this moment. Mia looked at him and smiled weakly. "Hi," Jamil smiled back. "Hey, strong girl," the nurse stepped in. "Her body isn't rejecting the kidney. The surgery was a success." Mia's mother held her hand to her mouth, crying. She looked at Jamil. "Thank you. I don't even know how to say it." "You just did," Jamil said softly. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. It was Officer Ray holding a coffee cup and a small envelope. "Sorry to interrupt," he said. "I brought something." He handed the envelope to Jamil. Jamil opened it carefully. Inside was a simple white card with the words, "We're sorry." Below that was a handwritten note. "We judged you too quickly. We forgot to see the man behind the hoodie. You gave life while we tried to take your freedom. You deserve better." Officer Ray Jamil looked at Ray, surprised. "I spoke to my chief," Ray said. "He wants to meet you, and a few people would like to share your story." Jamil raised an eyebrow. "What people?" Ray hesitated. "The media, the news, reporters. They want to talk about what happened to you, and what you did for Mia." Jamil shook his head. "I didn't do this to be on TV." "I know," Ray said. "But maybe someone out there needs to see this. Maybe it will stop another innocent man from being treated like a criminal." Jamil looked at Mia. She was smiling now, holding her mother's hand. He nodded. "All right, but only if Mia gets the spotlight." Later that day, a small local news channel came to the hospital. A soft-spoken reporter named Lena Moore interviewed Jamil, Mia's mother, and Officer Ray. Jamil sat quietly in front of the camera, still wearing the same clothes from the day before. Lena asked, "Why did you choose to donate your kidney to a stranger?" Jamil answered calmly, "Because someone saved me once. I wanted to pass that gift on. That's it." "What happened after the surgery?" she asked. Jamil's eyes darkened slightly. "I was stopped by police. They thought I robbed a store. I didn't." "Did they apologize?" Lena asked. "One of them did," he replied. "And that was enough." Lena smiled. "You're a rare kind of man, Jamil." "I'm just a man," he said. "But I hope people start seeing that hoodie doesn't mean danger. And silence doesn't mean guilt." The story aired that night, and something unexpected happened. It went viral. People from all over the city and even from other countries started sharing the clip. Social media was flooded with hashtags like "Justice for Jamil" or "Not All Suspects" and "Hero in a Hoodie." Celebrities tweeted about him. A famous doctor offered him a job at a medical charity. A children's book author said she wanted to write about Mia's story and include Jamil in it. But Jamil, he stayed quiet. He didn't go on big shows. He didn't chase attention. He just returned to the hospital every day, sitting by Mia's bed, reading stories to her, telling her jokes, and making her smile. One evening, as he left the hospital, a young boy stopped him outside. "Are you the guy who gave his kidney?" Jamil nodded. "My brother saw your story," the boy said. "He said, 'You're the kind of hero that doesn't wear a cape.'" Jamil smiled. "Tell your brother thank you." The boy added, "I want to be like you one day." Those words stayed with Jamil as he walked home. He thought about his past, the pain, the silence, the days he felt invisible. And now, for the first time, he felt seen, not as a suspect, but as a human being. Days passed. Mia was getting stronger. Her cheeks looked pink again. Her laugh was back, and she would draw pictures every morning. Pictures of a tall man in a hoodie with the word "hero" written under it. That man was Jamil. Every time he walked into her room, her face lit up. Tetun. Hospital staff had started treating him like family. Nurses smiled at him. Doctors thanked him. Even patients asked to take pictures with him. But Jamil still stayed humble. He didn't want to be famous. He just wanted to live. Quietly. Yet the world outside didn't forget. His story had become bigger than he imagined. At a high school not. Far away, a teacher played the news video during class. After it ended, a student raised her hand and said, Why do we judge people by how they look? Another said, that could have been my brother. Across the city, churches spoke about forgiveness using Jamil's story. Mosques spoke about compassion. One speaker at a university even said, this man taught us what real strength looks like. Meanwhile, Officer Ray sat alone in his car, one night watching the video again on his phone. He paused it at the part where Jamil said, a hoodie doesn't mean danger, and silence doesn't mean guilt. Those words hit Ray harder each time. He had worn the badge for 14 years. He thought he had seen it all, but nothing had prepared him for the guilt of almost ruining an innocent man's life. The next morning, he walked into the police station and requested to speak at the community meeting. His chief looked surprised. You sure? He asked. You really want to talk about the Jamil case on record? Ray nodded. Yes, I want to say what we all need to hear. That weekend, the community hall was packed. People of every color, age, and background filled the chairs. Jamil stood quietly at the back with Mia's mother. He didn't want the spotlight. He just came to listen. Ray stepped up to the microphone. He looked nervous but firm. He cleared his throat. 3 weeks ago, I stopped a man who looked like a robbery suspect. He wore a hoodie, walked alone, and matched a description. He paused. But I was wrong. The crowd grew quiet. That man had just donated a kidney to save a little girl's life. While we were putting him in cuffs, he had a hospital bracelet on his wrist. Gasps filled the room. Ray continued. We didn't ask questions. We didn't listen. We saw what we wanted to see, and almost ruined an innocent man's life. He turned to the crowd. I'm not here to defend what we did. I'm here to own it, to say sorry, and to ask that we do better. He looked toward the back where Jamil stood, calm and quiet. He's in this room, Ray said. But he didn't come here to be praised. He came here to remind us that behind every face, there's a story we don't know. The whole room stood and applauded. Jamil didn't move. He just nodded slowly. After the event, people walked up to him, thanking him, shaking his hand, some even crying. But one person stood out, a teenage boy in a police cadet uniform. He looked nervous. I just wanted to say, the boy said, I want to be an officer one day, but the kind that listens, like the one you inspired Officer Ray to become. Jamil smiled and patted the boy's shoulder. Then you'll be a good one. That night, as Jamil walked home, he passed a newsstand. His face was on the cover of a magazine with the headline, The Man Who Changed Minds Without Saying Much. He stopped and stared for a moment. Then he walked on. Because to Jamil, the story wasn't about fame. It was about something deeper. It was about being seen. It was about truth. It was about reminding the world. 2 months passed. Spring came. The trees turned green again, and the city that once judged Jamil in silence now knew his name. Not as a suspect, but as a symbol of strength, patience, and quiet heroism. In room 312, Mia was finally ready to go home. She stood near the window, in her tiny jacket, holding a teddy bear Jamil had gifted her. Her eyes were brighter now, her laughter louder. Jamil helped her zip her jacket. You excited? He asked. She nodded. Can I still see you after I go home? Jamil smiled. Always. You're stuck with me now. Mia giggled and hugged him tightly. Her mother stood nearby, her eyes full of tears again, but this time happy ones. Outside the hospital, a small group of people waited. Nurses, staff, Officer Ray, and even the news reporter, Lena Moore. They weren't there for a story. They were there for Mia, and for the man who had quietly changed all their hearts. Lena stepped forward and asked, One last photo? Jamil shook his head gently. Let her shine. So Mia stood with her mother, holding a small sign that said, Thank you, Jamil. He stood in the back, hands in his hoodie, watching with a quiet smile, but something was on his mind. That night, Jamil walked home under the streetlights. Everything looked the same, the sidewalks, the stores, the bus stops, but he didn't feel the same anymore. For years he had lived in the shadows. Now, People saw him, not because he shouted, not because he demanded, but because he loved, quietly, bravely, and without expecting anything in return. When he reached his apartment, he opened his old notebook, the one where he used to write poetry. No one had ever read. He flipped to a blank page and wrote, "Sometimes the loudest heroes don't speak. Sometimes justice walks slowly, and sometimes the one you judge too fast is the one who saves you in the end." The next morning, Jamil packed a small bag. He had made a decision. There was a clinic in another city, one that helped poor children who needed medical care. The same doctor who reached out after seeing the news had offered him a job there. He had turned it down at first. But now he wanted to go. Not to escape the past, but to build something better from it. Before he left, he stopped by the police station one last time. Ray met him at the steps. "You really leaving?" Ray asked. Jamil nodded. "It's time." Ray took something out of his pocket. It was a small silver badge. Not an officer's badge, but a community award. "Voice of Peace," it read. Jamil looked at it, then looked up. "I never wanted to be a voice." "I know," Ray said. "But sometimes quiet people echo the longest." They shook hands. Ray added, "You saved a girl's life. Then you saved mine." Jamil didn't reply. He just gave a small nod, the same way he always did. As he walked toward the bus station, people waved at him. Some called his name. A little girl even ran up and hugged his leg. But Jamil just kept walking, not because he didn't care, but because he had already said what he needed to say, through his actions, through his choices, through his heart. The bus pulled away slowly, disappearing into the morning mist. Back at the hospital, Mia hung a photo on her bedroom wall. It was a drawing she made herself. A man in a hoodie, holding a small heart in his hand with the words, "My hero didn't wear a cape. He wore kindness." And as the sun rose that day, a city remembered a man who had every reason to be bitter, but chose to be better.